Working on speed endurance is key for us runners because it allows us to run faster for longer. But how do we go about doing that? Well, in my personal current running journey, I'm transitioning from 10k training into half marathon training and will then move in further to a big marathon training block. And this means working on my speed endurance will be a key factor in my upcoming training. So I thought I'd share just how Coach and I will be aiming to achieve that. So I have talked about a few of these points before in previous videos. If you have heard some of them, I do apologise. I just want to go from the most generic right through to the more specific, going from basically increased mileage right down to what I'm going to be tinkering with sessions and long runs, just so that you guys can get an understanding there of what is going to be taking place in my training to hopefully help build better speed endurance moving into the autumn and winter. So without further ado, we're going to dive straight in. So point number one, as I just alluded to, an increase in mileage is going to be the first thing that happens. So to give you guys some context, you can see all of this on Strava if you follow me, but if you don't, bit of context here. Marathon training, I was training in and around sort of mid 60 mile weeks, low to mid 60 mile weeks for a lot of it. And I did peak in and around the 70 mile week area. I think I hit 71, 72 miles for 2 or 3 weeks before coming back down the other side. That really was my sweet spot. And that is where I love to train. I love volume. I'm very much a volume runner. That is where I am the happiest. But then when it comes to 10k training, the volume increases, the intensity goes up. So the volume went down to in and around that 40 mile to 50 mile weeks, and that's where I sat for around about 10 weeks. Normally what I'd have loved to have happened is a nice linear progression with a couple of down weeks thrown in there, but really starting in the mid to late 40s and going up into the early to mid 50s. That was what was on the plan. Just a few weeks I had to cut things short, move things around. So it didn't quite happen like that, but I did overall get some really good, solid, fast worked bank. So now, moving on from there, as I go into half marathon training, before then considering the next big marathon training block, volume will indeed be going back up. We'll probably kickstart things back into the 50s and move slowly back up into the 60s. This is going to massively help speed endurance because we're out there for longer. When the volume comes down, it really is kind of effectively sharpening up for me in terms of training. And when the volume goes up, I get to work on that base, work on that fitness, and that really helps massively. And point number two that I want to make, leading nicely on from the increase in mileage, is, well, where's that extra mileage going to come from? Are you just going to slap some extra miles on the end of every run? Well, a lot of it's going to come from extended sessions and extended long runs. This is where a lot of the quality in the week is going to come from. If I look back to marathon training, and if you guys have done different types of training blocks like marathon training and 5 and 10k training, you'll know that within marathon training you'll do longer reps, longer runs, and sessions might be longer, whereas in shorter training they might be shorter, sharper intervals, and as I said, the volume comes down. So in effect, a lot of my extra volume that's going to be coming now is going to be coming from bigger sessions, more time on feet in those, and then the long runs, more time on feet in the long runs, and some long run workouts with some bigger chunks of specific pace in there. There will be extra time in the easy and moderate runs coming, but overall a lot of it is going to be coming from those sessions and long runs. And what I'll do, I'll make sure I try and remember to do at the end of this video, if you are interested in hearing a few of some of my favourite half marathon workouts, I make sure in one of the videos that I leave at the end to leave some session ideas for you guys to have a look through, so you can see what you might want to drop in to your upcoming half marathon training block. And point number three, this is where we start to get a little bit more specific. What do we do and how do we effectively run longer reps if we're thinking, and put longer repetitions in our long runs? If you think back to 10k training or 5k training or really fast training, a lot of the times we might do some controlled interval sessions where we're trying to run at certain paces and efforts. But a lot of times when we're working that top end, we're looking to run some repetitions really flipping hard. And we're going to put a big old effort in, and this is our heart rate graph going up, and then we're going to have a long old recovery to allow it to come back down. And then we're going to put the next big effort in, and we're going to allow it to come back down. And we're going to have a really exaggerated heart rate graph because we're putting in a really hefty effort, but then we're having some good time to recover, and we're really trying to push that top end. Well, when we start to go into longer distance stuff, one of the key factors here to maintaining longer interval sessions is really working to specific paces, specific efforts. So for me, going into half marathon training, I'll be working a lot in and around 10k effort, probably a little bit of marathon effort, but a lot in and around half marathon effort, and a sprinkle a little bit faster, and maybe some a little bit slower. And we're going to be working at or in and around that goal half marathon pace. So that effort level is much more sustainable for a longer period of time within an interval, and it also gets our body to used to running at that pace and effort, and gets biomechanically gets us ready for what we're about to endure for 13.1 26.1 miles, and then effectively when I move up to the marathon, 26.2. So that's how we can then sustain longer interval sessions. We're not kind of going out there and really hammering them really hard, but there's going to be a little bit more of a controlled focus to it, trying to work in and around that goal pace area. And then our heart rate graph is going to be a little bit less up and down crazy and a little bit more controlled. Squeeze those recoveries down, shorter recoveries, to allow our heart rate to stay up higher for longer, and effectively that's going to be a massive benefit when we're working on speed endurance. And point number 4, another thing you'll see changing that really is going to make a massive difference to speed endurance is learning to float your recoveries as well as easy jog them. This doesn't apply to every single workout, and it really is specific to the workout you're doing. But if you don't know what a float is, effectively when we do our intervals, as we were just talking about, you really put that high effort in, and then we come back down to either a walk or an easy jog recovery, whatever your coach or training plan prescribes you. Yeah, we're getting that really exaggerated graph. Well, what we're effectively doing with these workouts is squeezing them together a little bit more. So suddenly I might go out and do a workout at half marathon pace. This is my half marathon effort. And my float pace is not easy, it's not marathon pace, it's my steady pace in the middle. So effectively, I'm squeezing that distance between hard and very easy right down to there, and working very much specifically in this zone. Because we're not working as hard at the top end, it doesn't quite redline us as much as a normal interval session would, and we can control that pace, control that effort, and extend it out for a longer period of time, meaning we don't quite have to easy jog recovery. That also in turn, psychologically as well as physically, helps us learn to kind of push those recoveries a little bit harder. I mean, steady pace shouldn't be hard. It's not for me, and for me in terms of heart rate, my normal easy heart rate is around 128 to 135 in that area. My steady heart rate is anywhere from like 139 up to 146, so it's just that notch up. And that really does help us control not only the pace we're running our intervals at, because we know that if we run those too hard, we definitely won't be able to float, but it also allows us to control those recoveries as well and put a little bit more into it. And overall, when you finish the session, as we just talked about with that heart rate graph, it's going to be a little bit more like that rather than this big spiking graph. And again, it's so beneficial for speed endurance. And the 5th and final thing that I want to mention that's going to be very noticeable later on during this training plan, and especially moving into marathon training, is putting some bigger days back to back. Just a quick example of that. During my last marathon training block, I was doing steady runs on a Friday and then my long run on a Saturday. Now those steady runs would often be 70 minutes, 75 minutes odd, light steady work before then rolling into a 2-hour plus long run on the weekend. So I'd often cover over 30 miles in the space of 2 days. For some people that is nothing, especially for elite athletes, but for a lot of people, it is a big blooming deal, and it was for me, and it is for me, it still is, but it plays massive benefits when it comes to endurance, not only because you're putting 2 big efforts together within sort of 24 hours of each other, or I should say 2 big time on feet efforts, but it learns to teach your body to work through fatigue. You go into that long run feeling a bit of fatigue, you feel the pinch, and especially towards the end, you really do start to notice that day before run starts to catch up with you. But again, it all comes down to control. As long as you control that steady run the day before, it shouldn't have too much of an impact on the long run. It just effectively, for me, made me feel a little bit fatigued towards the end. But overall, it made a massive difference leading into my marathon, and I just felt so fit. And it doesn't have to be done like that. Back-to-back days can be done in other ways. You can mix and match your runs. And again, I'll just say back to you guys, if you've got a coach or a training plan, they or the training plan may or may not suggest it, but just if you're looking for ideas, then some back-to-back big days can often help. I'm not talking you have to go out and do 2 long runs, but I'm just talking about sometimes it can just be 2 70+ minute efforts, 80+ minute efforts, depending on your ability level. That is a good starting place for me, and I often find that plays a massive role, again, in really working on my speed endurance. So for me, those are the 5 key elements that are going to be changing over the coming weeks. As it stands right now, I'm still in the early infancy of half marathon training, but as we move into September and October, you're going to see things shift drastically in terms of my training. If you're following the training series, that drops every Sunday, so you'll be able to follow along there and see what I'm doing. And of course on Strava, it's all on there. I'll make sure the links are in the description for that. And I'd love to hear from you guys what your favourite ways of training are to work on your speed endurance. When we drop down to shorter, sharper training, we always lose a little bit of endurance, but to get it back, what do you guys like to do? Have you got any particular favourite sessions that you love to throw in, any types of runs, tempo runs, threshold runs. What do you find the most effective way to help build back your speed endurance? Do share your thoughts in the comments below. Everyone would love to read them, and it'd be great to hear what you guys do down there. That's it from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving it a like, share it with your friends, and of course do consider subscribing to the channel for weekly running content. I'll see you in the next one. Until then.